In this lesson, I'm going to show you guys how to do a simple walk cycle using an imported bipedal system. So let's start off by creating some place for our figure to walk. So I'm just going to create a plain primitive, and let's get it positioned in the center, and then I'm just going to scale it out so it fits a little bit better. Just give it a, there we go. Alright, so we got a surface for our character to walk on. Let's actually reduce the segments to 1 so it's not thinking more than it needs to. So to create a bipedal system, you are going to go to Create, and you're going to go to Systems, and then Biped is the second one down. And then just click and drag anywhere on that, and your bipedal figure will pop right in. And it's just so that's what a bipedal system looks like. This is usually created as a means to start a basis for a skeletal structure for a character, right? From here, we're just going to make a couple changes that I wanted to show you what you can do. So if you see under body type, you have several options. First thing that I want to address is that he has one finger and one toe, which is kind of creepy. So let's give the poor guy some more fingers. Oops, I'm going to select him first. Let's just go down and select that from the list. And I'm going to go over to moment. Alright, so first thing we want to do, why aren't you responding to me? It is because I am in the wrong menu. You want to switch over to the motion menu and you want to click on figure mode. And from here, you can go down to structure, and here is where you can add more fingers. So I want to give him 5 fingers with 2 segments each. That looks a little bit less terrifying. And let's give him, let's see, 5 toes with 2 links each. That looks better. Let's give him actually 1 less spine, make it easier to pose. So now that I have the figure where the bipedal figure where I want it to be, I'm going to uncheck figure mode. And the next step is I am going to go to the copy paste section as the only other one I'm going to need. So I'm just going to close some of these other ones down. So copy paste is pretty much the only other place we're going to be using for the rest of this exercise in this menu. So first thing we want to do is to create a collection, right? And creating a collection is just what this animation is going to be. So this collection for me is going to be a walk cycle. So I'm just going to call it walk cycle, and I'm going to even spell it correctly. There we go. The next thing we want to do is to kind of create poses. For a walk cycle, there's 2 major poses. There is the key position, where is typically where one foot is outstretched forward and the other foot is all the way back, where you're taking your first step. So that's one pose we're going to work on. And the other one is the passing pose, and that's where one foot is on the ground and the other foot is lifted. So we're going to focus on those 2 poses first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the first pose. So as I said, that first pose is going to be one foot is going to be brought out forward, And as you can see, I'm only dealing with the rotation points here because I don't want to move any limbs. So I'm going to start with the green leg back. And if I want to be extra super fancy, I can bend the toes, but I want to keep this moving, so we'll just kind of leave it right there. Right, and then the other thing you want to remember is that, you know, when you're walking, your arms are actually moving opposite. So if, in this case, if the green leg is going back, the green arm will be coming forward, and vice versa. Now I'm just more comfortable using the perspective view. If you want to go back and use all your views, it's up to you. It might be easier if you don't have a lot of experience in the program. So this is generally the first key position. Those are the basics of it, but you know, to get the best result, you want to think about how the body moves. So obviously, if his left foot is forward, his pelvis is actually going to turn a little bit, right? And then since his shoulders are also, you know, the left arm is forward and the right is not, he would also be turning in one direction. So I'm going to select all three of his spinal things and just kind of turn them a little bit, right? That looks good. And you can go as far as to kind of, I like to put a little twist to the arms. All right, so that is essentially what we want for, oops, I deselected him, my first key position, right? So let's go back to copy and paste. All right, so now I want to click on copy pose, right? And you want to make sure you're under the pose, you have pose selected here, not posture or track, you want pose. And then I'm just going to name this key, where am I going? Key 01. All right. So now I want to start posing the second position. And in this case, oops, the arms are to the side. And these are kind of generally speaking. If you want to take some creative liberties and kind of mix these up, but this is just kind of a good place to start. And his spine has been rotated, so I'm going to get that back in place. Looks about right. And like I said, he's going to be taking a step now. So let's get one foot planted on the ground. And then we'll bend this other one. Oh, that looks a little bit off to me. Oh, that's why. Because his pelvis is turned. There we go. So, that's pretty good for a second position. Let me get him reselected here. So now I want to create a new pose. I'm going to create it, and I'm going to call this passing 01. Okay, so the great part is that's pretty much where we need to start. So now what we're going to do is get this guy moving. So let's get him selected. I'm going to make sure my timeline is starting way back to frame 0. And I'm going to start animating. And for this exercise, we're going to use auto key. So go ahead and click that, but be very, very careful. See, the problem with auto key is that any change you make will be recorded. So you have to be very careful on what you're doing. So I would strongly refrain from clicking on anything in the viewport during this point when you have auto key on, because we're going to be relying on the poses we created on this panel here to create the animation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch back to key 1, because this is where I want to start. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say paste pose. And you can see that he automatically goes into that pose. So from here, I'm going to move over, I'm just going to say 7 frames, and I'm going to switch over to passing 01, and then I'm going to hit paste pose. Since I have auto key on, you can see that it is recording it as I made that change. You also want to make sure that from the drop down menu from select from scene that you have the whole biped selected, which here it's reading as BIP 001. Right? So now that I have that second step down, you can see that he's starting to move already. Now I'm going to go, since that was 7 frames, I'm going to go 7 more. And I'm going to switch back to the key 1, but in this situation, I don't want him to go back to key 1. I want him to do the opposite, because at this point, his other foot should be forward. So what I'm going to do instead is paste pose opposite. So now you can see that that other foot is coming forward instead, right? So I'm going to go 7 more frames, and I'm going to go to passing 01, and again I'm going to paste pose opposite. Okay, and I'm going to do this one more time, because at this point he needs to go back to the position where he started. So I'm going to go back to key 01, and then I'm going to paste pose. Okay, now since this is only 28 frames, I want this loop to only be 28 frames. So I'm going to click on time configuration, and for end time I'm just going to set 28. And this should be whatever your last keyframe is. So now, if I hit play, he is walking. A little slow, but you know, you can adjust that by reducing the amount of time between keyframes. And you know, from here, you know, I did some pivoting of his pelvis and his shoulders, but obviously when you walk, there's a lot more going on. For example, when you're doing the passing position, the hips are going to be a little higher. So be sure and kind of, if you need to, and a lot of animators do this, record yourself walking. You know, record yourself doing a silly walk and then try to replicate it. You know, keep an eye on every single body part, because every single body part is involved when you are walking. So the more you take into consideration, the more believable and engaging your character will be.